Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us today as we discuss West Virginia's new Fresh Food Act. Passed by the West Virginia Legislature in 2019, this act mandates that state-funded agencies shall purchase a minimum of 5% of its fresh produce, meat, and poultry products from in-state producers, provided that such produce, meat, and poultry products can be grown or is available from in-state producers. This legislation holds a great deal of promise for West Virginia's farmers, food manufacturers, and our state's economy as a whole. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. This slide describes what we'll be covering today: the law passed by the legislature, the emergency rules developed by the West Virginia Department of Agriculture, and what's expected from state institutions. We'll also tell you when additional information will be coming your way and provide some frequently asked questions that we've already heard and provided answers to. Following this presentation, please send any comments or questions to freshfood@wvda.us. We'll compile the questions, provide answers or guidance, and respond in a timely manner. The purposes of the West Virginia Food Act are to stimulate the agricultural economy in West Virginia, to encourage state-funded institutions to growing their own meat and produce, and to spur self-sufficiency and economic independence. The Fresh Food Act is a bare-bones piece of legislation, but it spans a number of broad purposes. Clearly, keeping more West Virginia dollars in West Virginia is a fundamental goal of this legislation. Our state spends more than $8 billion a year on food, but produces less than $1 billion. Keeping even a fraction of these dollars in state would have a multiplying effect within the larger economy. Requiring purchases of state food encourages establishment of new farms and may encourage growth of current farms by establishing a market that West Virginia growers can supply. Schools in particular are well positioned to grow at least some of their own food. In addition, they can also better promote healthful diets and knowledge of food production and self-sufficiency. The program hinges on both the supply side and the demand side. Demand is what we're talking about today. With a mandatory built-in market, more farmers will soon find a way to meet that demand. When we first saw the Fresh Food Act, we understood that it would be difficult to jump immediately to 5%. Both from purchasing and production standpoints. As we developed the rules to accompany the Act, we intentionally built in a waiver program that would help institutions phase in purchasing and farmers to scale up production. One note here on administrative rules. The legislature frequently enacts laws that need more detail before they can be put into effect. The Fresh Food Act was a perfect one-page example. The WVDA was called upon to develop rules to implement a very broad policy outlined by the legislature. However, agency rules must go back to the legislature for approval during the next full session in early 2020. Because the Fresh Food Act was passed in the spring of 2019 and was given an effective date of July 1, 2019, we are operating under emergency rules until this 2020 session. There's no crisis involved. These rules simply have not gone through the entire legislative process. Of course, that means there may be changes once the legislature finishes up with them. But for today, let's take a look to see where we currently stand with the bill. First of all, we understand that this is a major shift for many of us. And because of that, the WVDA needs an ongoing point of contact or liaison, which will allow us to work through the process of getting this program up and running. This individual should have knowledge of food purchasing and access to records because he or she will be responsible for reporting. As you can see from this slide, the deadline to appoint a liaison has passed. So we encourage everyone to get us a name and contact information as soon as possible. Please note that we have a dedicated email address for this program, freshfood@wvda.us, or you can also call the WVDA Business Development Division at 304-558-2210. The next reporting deadline is January 1st, 2020. As this is very fast approaching, we encourage everyone to start gathering the information required and report to the WVDA as soon as you can. If this is not by January 1st, then shortly thereafter. For this reporting deadline, the liaison needs to collect information on the food the institution has purchased over the past 3 years. This might include food contracts for events or an annual summary of purchases from a food service company. It should also include contact information for food vendors used in the past. The next reporting deadline is March 31st, 2020, when an analysis of food contracts and purchases should be submitted. To better understand the types of food and their sources which state institutions are purchasing, the WVDA wants to collect the percentage of West Virginia food purchased in previous years, if any, and any information regarding initiatives to purchase West Virginia food and the results of such an effort. And don't forget that any food produced by the institution counts toward its West Virginia food total. This information should be gathered on a form that will be provided to you by the WVDA. This initial assessment will do 2 things. It will provide a baseline annual food expenditure to calculate the 5% local share, and it will give insight into the types and amounts of items that can be produced in West Virginia to satisfy the needs of our state institutions. This information can be submitted again to the freshfood@wvda.us email or mailed to the WVDA, Business Development Division, 1900 Kanawha Boulevard East, Charleston, West Virginia, 25305. As you have seen from these past slides, the first full year of this program has fundamentally been about gathering information. Of course, if you're already purchasing or producing your West Virginia food, just be sure to keep track of it as a local purchase. I'm sure some of you are saying, I'll never be able to find or grow 5% of the food we use at this institution. Am I going to be out of compliance? No. If you have provided the information we have just discussed, you will be considered to be in compliance with the rules through 2020. Having said that, I would strongly encourage everyone to take the next year to work diligently on securing as much food sourcing as possible. So to review just a bit, to comply with the West Virginia Fresh Food Act through 2020, a state-funded institution must do 3 things as shown on the above slide. Select and maintain an appropriate liaison to the WVDA, submit food contracts, vendors, and their contact information, and submit your organization's food purchasing analysis on a form that will be provided to you by the WVDA. In the years after 2020, there will be reporting requirements similar to those we've already gone over. A report will be due August 31st each year, which gives institutions time to close out their fiscal year and prepare the appropriate information. The WVDA will develop a form that asks for a number of items: total amount spent directly or indirectly on food, percentage of West Virginia food purchased, prior fiscal year documentation detailing expenditures on all food purchased, if relevant, the quantity and cash value of West Virginia foods grown by the institution, and any other information requested by the Commissioner of Agriculture. We mentioned waivers earlier in the presentation, and now we'll explain in detail the 2 types of waivers within the program. The first is the phase-in waiver. Phase-in waivers will allow institutions to be considered in compliance as long as the requirements for fiscal year 2020 and beyond are met. 5% doesn't sound like a lot, but the people in this webinar can appreciate the volume of food that we consume here in West Virginia. 5% of all institutional food is still a lot of food, more than we'll be able to bring online in a single year. Again, to be eligible to receive any waiver, institutions must show a good faith effort toward purchasing West Virginia foods. That means doing the things set forth on this slide. appointing the liaison, submitting your food contracts, and developing and submitting your food purchasing analysis. As you see, the phase-in waivers will allow incremental progress toward the full 5% purchase required by the law. We basically start off at 1% in 2020, adding 1% each year until 2025. The second type of waiver is the individual compliance waiver, which authorizes institutions a retroactive waiver from purchasing requirements under certain circumstances. Institutions must continue to make a good faith effort to reach that appointed percentage, and they must provide good reasons if they fail to do so. They must demonstrate that they tried but could not secure West Virginia foods, and they must document any extenuating circumstances that prevent them from reaching the specific percentage. This slide gives some more detail regarding what needs to be shown to receive a purchasing percentage waiver. The purchase report form, a description of circumstances giving rise to the request, an explanation of efforts taken to comply, a plan to increase the purchasing percentage in the next year, along with any documents or other information requested by the Commissioner of Agriculture. Just to cover all of our bases, here are some extra rules related to the Fresh Food Act. West Virginia grown products are presumed to qualify. Sellers who fraudulently misrepresent the geographical source of food sold to a state-funded institution or otherwise engage in deception shall not be allowed to participate in the Fresh Food Act. Products cannot be resold that have been grown or produced outside of West Virginia's borders in order to satisfy the local purchasing mandate. Producers are not prevented from purchasing agricultural inputs such as feed, seedlings, fertilizer, plugs, etc. from out-of-state vendors. And producers may engage in or contract for minimal processing before sale. As we wrap up this presentation, we wanted to thank the agencies for their patience as we have worked through the rulemaking process, and encourage anyone with additional questions to contact us through one of the channels listed on this slide. We look forward to hearing from you and continuing progress on the West Virginia Fresh Food Act. Following this slide, please review the frequently asked questions we have previously received and provided answers to. Additional questions can be sent to freshfood@wvda.us, and any other questions can be directed to the WVDA Business Development Division at 304-558-2210. Thank you so much for your time.